The five-door Suzuki Jimny kicked up quite the storm before its launch. Despite all its iconic pedigree and grand expectations, it has not set sales charts on fire in India. Today, almost 2 years later, now that the dust and all the noise has finally settled, TRIPACCINO drills down deep into the truth under the hood. In my personal opinion, under this tiny persona, the Jimny is an indestructible tank, a tank which has been grossly misunderstood by many of us. So here comes all that is good and bad about this tiny tank. To kick off things, let us dial back to the Jimny's origin story. Would you believe that this was an ancestor of the iconic Jimny? Meet the Hope Star SM, a three-wheeled auto rickshaw style truck made by the Hope Motors in Japan during the 1960s. This thing grew another wheel and became the Hope Star Unicar. Hope Motors built a four-wheel drive all-terrain car that the Hope Star ON360 before going bankrupt in 1968. The ON360 was a rugged four-wheel drive which used a bunch of Mitsubishi parts, including the engine and even the tires. But Mitsubishi refused to take over production after the company went bust. Luckily, Suzuki bought it out and the ON360 became the Light Jeep 10, LJ10. This was the Mini Jeep or Jeep Mini or Jimny, where Suzuki swapped out the engine with its own 359cc motor and tucked the spare wheel inside the car behind the seat to make it a three-seater under the 3-meter rule for the K-car tax benefits. From those humble beginnings, the Jimny evolved and adapted with each generation and ruled our hearts here at home as the Gypsy for decades together. Despite many changes it saw over the years, it's always been true to its original DNA, a compact, rugged, no-nonsense workhorse. Cut to 2023 and the five-door Jimny or Jimny XL launched in India and boom came the price tag. Unfortunately, hot on the heels of the popular Mahindra Thar. The Jimny's ambitiously high launch price hurt its sales numbers after the initial euphoria died. What followed was a graduated dealer-level discount month on month for the hit and trial guessing game to find out what is the customer actually willing to pay. It went to an obscene 3.3 lakh discount last July, which recovered sales somewhat. But what's interesting to see through the TRIPACCINO lens is that even though the domestic sales were in a slump, exports kept the bean counter ticking for Suzuki. And if you stack both domestic and export sales together, the factory was pushing out an average of 4,000 units a month, which was comfortable compared to the company's initial estimates for what they called a premium niche vehicle. Even today, the export demand for the Jimny is through the roof and it has found its fit in markets like Japan. On road, the ride is very well settled. Surprisingly, for a ladder frame riding on solid axles front and back, it is great. On a simple 3-point suspension, it is very good. I would rate it the stock ride quality even better than the Thar. But handling, the steering feels so sluggish and refuses to return to center, RTC. Handling is primitive and suited only for off-road. On-road, it's a real buzzkill. If you are in a hurry to get somewhere in the Jimny, you will reach before the Jimny does. It takes its own sweet time to climb up the speedo and hold triple digits. Again, one overdrive gear for cruising. Ratios are biased for low-end off-road. So it is not an eager beaver on the highways. We should understanding of that fact and accept the Jimny only if we are okay with this. What I noticed was even slight crosswinds and lane changes at high speeds will easily unsettle this tall body running on narrow tracks. I had my heart in my mouth when I tried one such misadventure on the highway. Tall and narrow also means that it can squeeze into urban jungles and find elusive parking spots. But again, the steering feels like you're driving some other car totally. You know what I say in TRIPACCINO. The truth is always under the hood. And our review of the Jimny will not be forgiven if we don't address this. Everyone on the internet and their mother-in-law have one thing to say about this engine. underpowered. Maybe they're right. We'll get to that in a moment. But look at this elegantly simple layout. One north south mounted engine, air duct running straight forward behind the right headlight, one battery, some basic tidbits, and nothing else. No turbo trying to squeeze out last ounce of power from this tiny motor. No nonsense. Just pure, naturally aspirated, air breathing engine. See how much space is there still left. And I know some bad boys are planning ungodly modifications with it, but to each his own. See, turbos give us that turbo kick, better numbers on paper, and unlimited bragging rights. Don't get me wrong, turbos do have their place in the world and help us to recover a lot of energy that would have otherwise been lost with the exhaust by forced induction. Heck, it has even made engines smaller thanks to turbine technology. But naturally aspirated, straight burning engines will give you predictable linear power delivery. It's definitely more reliable and easy to fix if anything goes wrong. There is nothing here in this engine bay that you can't fix with a Phillips head screwdriver, some cable ties, and duct tape. And if you're like me, and you would definitely enjoy that kind of peace of mind off the road rather than paper tiger power figures. Let's talk power. This is the K15B. It puts out 105 PS at 6000 rpm and 134 Newton meters of torque at 4000 rpm. It's a petrol motor, so it is not genetically tuned for low end torque, unlike diesels. Same petrol engine we saw in the previous gen Brezza, XL6 Ertiga, etc. All those have now switched to the K15C engine. A lot of folks were angry at Suzuki for not launching the Jimny with the K15C. But we need to understand that those cars are front wheel drive cars with transversely mounted engines. Jimny is rear wheel drive, four wheel drive, longitudinally mounted engine, and the gearbox is also oriented to that architecture. So a change would be complete redesign of the powertrain layout. So I guess the company didn't want to do that. So we are stuck with this familiar old boy, the K15B. The quoted power and torque for any car on the brochure is what the engine makes at the crankshaft end. In every TRIPACCINO review, I have shown you how this torque travels from the engine through the drivetrain until it finally hits the wheels on the road. The torque gets multiplied by the gearbox and flows to the rear differential normally when the car is in two-wheel drive, and in four-wheel drive high, the transfer case comes into play and clutches in the forward prop shaft as well, and the torque splits to the front differential also, additional to the rear differential. In four-wheel drive low, another set of gears inside the transfer case multiply the torque even more to give you that beast mode. I've explained this drivetrain mechanics for every car we have reviewed, but this time I want to set right some basics first. Based on our community feedback, let me show how this torque actually gets multiplied. This black gear is the engine's gear, the crankshaft end. So the engine is spinning this gear at say 1 revolution per minute, and assume by spinning this it makes 10 Newton meters of torque. The speed of engine is 1 rpm and the torque is 10 Newton meters. That means the engine can do 10 Newton meters of twisting work. Okay. Let's say this engine gear has 20 centimeter diameter and has 20 teeth around it. I'm now going to clutch in a gear from the gearbox to this engine. That is the next piece in the drivetrain line, correct? I'm clutching in a gear identical to the engine gear. That will also be 20 centimeter dia with 20 teeth. The engine is the prime mover. It's the only gear which is turning. So the other gear simply will follow. Boom. Now see what happened. The speed of the new gear is also 1 rpm. Torque is also same, 10 Newton meters. This ratio of the gear sizes between the driving gear and the driven gear is called the gearing ratio. Here it is 1:1, which is also called direct drive because there is no change, right? The driving gear and the driven gear are directly spinning at the same speed. Let me now clutch in a bigger gear, twice the diameter, say 40 centimeter dia and say 40 teeth. Now the gearing ratio, which is the ratio of the diameters, is 2:1. Boom. See what happened now. The driving gear, the engine gears, is still spinning at 1 rpm, but the larger driven gear will do only half revolution every minute, 0.5 rpm. So the engine has to spin 2 revs to make the larger gear finish 1 rev. But what about torque? Torque is force into lever arm, or force into distance, or force into diameter in this case. So the torque doubles when the gear size doubles. You can also understand this thinking in a different way. For each full turn of the large gear, it will contain 2 times the twisting capacity that the engine can produce by turning itself once. Correct? So in effect, the gearing ratio is 2:1, torque doubles to 20 Newton meters, speed halves to 0.5 rpm. This is the torque multiplication or speed reduction. Let's clutch in a smaller gear, 10 centimeter dia, 10 teeth, half the size of the driving engine gear. Same physics, but boom, torque halves to 5 Newton meters, but the speed doubles to 2 revolutions every minute. Since this gear is overperforming on speed compared to the driving engine gear, this gearing ratio of 0.5:1 is called overdrive, because this gear spins faster than the engine itself, but it has compromised its capability to do twisting work, which is torque, because torque is halved. So remember this mantra: high speed, low torque, low speed, high torque. It logically follows now that larger gearing ratios will give good pulling torque required from standstill, and hence suitable for first and second gears, etc. in the gearbox. Smaller gearing, which have these decimal gearing ratios, which are overdrive gears, are suitable for effortless low strain cruising at high speeds, because speed is more and torque is less. So 5th or 6th gears are generally overdrive gears. Now extend this idea along the drivetrain chain from engine to gearbox to transfer case to differential. Each step multiplies the torque according to its own respective gearing ratio, and that's what finally hits the wheel as the final output. The torque at the wheel, which is completely different from what is quoted at the brochure. But remember, the last piece of this puzzle is the tire itself, whose diameter itself is kind of the last gear in this chain. That's why if you upsize the tire diameter, you will lose torque hitting the road finally. Speed errors will creep in, and you have to remember that important side effect and correct your odo and speedo accordingly. I have a separate video for the perils of upsizing. Check that out if you're interested. Now that we are comfortable with the basics, let's enter the Jimny's drivetrain. There's one engine, the K15B, 2 gearbox options, the JB74W 5-speed manual and 4-speed automatic. Very interesting thing which is unique to the Jimny to be noted is that the transfer case and even the differentials are different in each case. That is, the manual has a different transfer case and differential, and so does the auto. So the gearing ratios have to be taken correctly for the respective consideration. Many expert reviews out there are making sweeping statements that the first gear ratio of the automatic is so short at 2.88:1, and see the manual, its first gear is great at 4.42:1, so the manual is great for torquey off-roading, right? So these statements we are hearing. This is a very generalized, half-baked understanding which is more harmful than no understanding at all. Since we now actually know the basic mechanics of how this works, let us now engage the first gear in manual and calculate its final drive ratio with high range, which is direct drive 1:1, and its differential at 4.09:1. We get a final drive ratio of 18.08. Similarly, if we do it for automatic gearbox first gear with its respective ratios, we will get a final drive ratio of 15.51. So the torque would get multiplied by this number in each case when it hits the road finally, right? It seems that there is a difference of 3 out of 15 for the auto compared to the manual. So that would be about 20% weaker, right? Well, not true. Hold that thought, and now let us see what happens in 4x4 low range. The maximum torque will be available at the beast mode, right, which is the 4x4 low range, 4-wheel drive low. because this will be the combination of the largest possible gearing ratios, just as I explained now, in the entire chain, correct? So this ratio which we will get is called the crawl ratio. We described it in detail in the Thor Rocks review. If you want, you can check that out. This crawl ratio is an important metric. It's an indicator of the drivetrain's overall efficacy in torque multiplication. So more this number, the better. In my earlier video, I've shown for Rocks, Gurkha, Scorpio, and etc. and how the Wrangler Rubicon has an eye-watering crawl ratio of 100:1. This you will understand that, for example, it will take 100 rotations of the engine to rotate the axle once in the Jeep Wrangler Rubicon. Massive torque multiplication and hence massive speed reduction for controlled crawling. 100 times that the torque that the engine makes is available to the wheels for every single rotation of the axle. For the Jimny, it works out to be 36.16 for the manual, and for the automatic, it is 30.64. Again, a difference of 6 out of 30, and the auto looks 20% weaker, right? Well, not true again. To explain how the automatic variant and the manual variant behave actually in on-road conditions, I'll use something which is more visible and tangible to us, to the driver, than talking about torque. Juggle back to the gearing animation and remember the mantra I told you: high torque, low speed, low torque, high speed, right? So while crawling, we want the maximum torque, which means minimum speed of the vehicle, right? So off-road, you want high torque, you want low crawl speed, means you want controlled low speed crawling speed. So if instead of seeing torque, if we actually see what gear gives what road speed between the automatic and the manual, it's a visible, tangible appreciation of the difference between the boxes. I hope that's clear. We are going to, instead of talking about torque multiplication, which we cannot see physically, we are going to consider it as speed reduction, which we can see physically. So I'll explain more fundamentally. Take the Jimny manual gearbox. These are the speeds that the car will move forward with at each gear at particular engine RPM. How to read this graph? Suppose you have slotted the car into first gear and press the accelerator to push the engine to 3000 RPM. Then your tacho will read 3000 RPM, which will show the engine revs, and your speedo will show about 20-22 kilometers per hour, which is the speed at which the car is moving ahead. Now, if you slot it into the second gear on the manual gearbox and maintain the engine RPM at 3000 revs, then the speed of the car will increase to about 40-45 kilometers per hour, which the graph is showing. You do this all intuitively while driving, but we are just showing the same in this graph clearly. All this, mind you, is on stock tire size, because I told you that is the last piece of puzzle. If you upsize, then the speed will change because you have changed the diameter and hence the circumference and hence the distance traveled per revolution. I hope that is clear. So all the treatment we are doing is for the stock tire size. Next, let us do the same treatment for the automatic variant and show the comparison between the road speed at each gear, what the manual does and the automatic does. You will now see that the auto box is behaving almost similar to the manual in the normal two-wheel drive mode. This is a massive revelation and debunks the popular myth which is being publicized. You can see again carefully that the auto box behaves almost similar to the manual for first, second and top gears. The only change in behavior is when we are talking about the third and fourth gear, that region. If you now see, I have shown you every gear in the manual gearbox has an equivalent gear in the automatic gearbox for first, second and top gear. The problem is for the third gear in the manual gearbox, an equivalent automatic gear is missing. Similarly, for fourth manual, an equivalent automatic gearbox is missing. Why? Because the manual is 5 speed, so the entire gear spread is divided into 5 steps, but the automatic is 4 speed, so the entire gear spread is divided into 4 steps only. So for argument's sake, we can assume that the automatic has one 3.5th gear, which has to do the laborious job of what both third and fourth gear do in the manual. That is shown by this arrow region, this graveyard which I am showing. Here is where the automatic struggles. Forget all that if it's too technical. Simply in summary, in open roads and highways, both the manual and the automatic are similar in experience. The automatic 4-speed gearbox is slower compared to modern torque converters, but there are some tricks which the Jimny's gearbox has, which I'll demonstrate in just a bit. Hold on. The slow speed off-road applications also, I felt that the Autobox crawled very well and gave similar control to what a manual gearbox does. Generally in off-road we will prefer manual box because it's more user controllable, but I felt that the auto was very good and it was comparable to the manual. The only place where the auto will be found wanting is hill and ghat sections, where it will take its own time to shift up and down. For those times when you need quick shifts or quick power on tap, there are the few tricks which is available in the gearbox, which I will show you. Just hold on that. All this was in the high range. What happens when we shift to 4-wheel drive low? Different transfer cases for each shows that somehow the auto has a better chance because of higher gearing ratio of 2.64:1 compared to 2:1 of the manual transfer case, right? Wrong again. See, inside the transfer case, the manual variant think that there are two sets of gears, high and low. Relative to each other, they are at 2:1 ratio. Similarly, inside the transfer case of the automatic variant of the Jimny, there are two gears, high and low. Relative to each other, they are also 1.32:1 and 2.64:1. Exactly 2:1 ratio again. So crawl speed of the manual will be exactly half of high range in low range. In the automatic also, the crawl speed in low range will be exactly half of what the high range of the automatic will give. So respectively, whatever each of them did in high range, when you put it in low range, they will put half that speed. Is that clear? Don't worry, it will become clear now. See, look at this chart. It shows the road speeds for manual when we are in high range and same manual when we are in low range. You will see that the second low and the first high of the manual are same. The second high and the fourth low are also same. For automatic, if we do the same thing, that is comparing the 4 high of the automatic with the 4 low of the automatic, you will again see a similar pattern. Last chart, combining the 4-wheel drive low of the automatic and comparing it with the 4-wheel drive low of the manual in the same graph. You will see that the first low of the manual is only marginally better than the first low of the automatic, and the second low is also only marginally better. If it's all too technical, try to watch this video bit again and try to see if you understand, or else overall, in summary, practically the automatic is definitely not inferior to the manual even in off-road. So that finally settles it. Now, how do you work around having only 4 gears in the automatic to play around with, especially the 3.5 gear graveyard region I showed you, right? For that, let us go into the car and study the automatic gear shifter and all the party tricks it has up its sleeve. This is the Suzuki Jimny's automatic shifter. This is the transmission shifter, and this is the transfer case shifter. This controls the 4-speed automatic gearbox, and this controls the 4-wheel drive transfer case. The gearbox shifter has PRND2L shift lock and OD. I'll explain everything one by one. Normally, P is park, and normally the car is stopped, you're parked safely and you're about to switch off the engine, put the car in park. Park means that the prop shaft is also locked and hence the wheels won't turn. The car just won't move. In contrast, when you put it in neutral, that is N, all the gears and shafts are disengaged and the wheels are free to move like a toy car. The drivetrain is completely disconnected from the wheels and only externally you can push the car as you wish. No amount of revving the engine will move the car even 1 inch because it is completely disconnected. What is this shift lock then? Well, now that the vehicle is parked and the gear lever is in P and the engine is off, if you want to say push or move the car from outside, it just won't move because the shaft is locked and the wheel is locked. In a manual car, you will just now press the clutch and shift it to neutral. But here in the automatic, the shift controller is locked, it won't move. So the shift lock is actually the shift lock release button, which you press and then release the locked shifter to slot it to neutral easily. That is the mystery button, shift lock release. R is of course reverse, moves the car backwards, and D is drive, which is the automatic mode of this automatic gearbox. You put it in D and simply accelerate as you go about your business. The box will shift up and down within the available 4 gears it has inside. Now, what is this 2? This has been wrongly and incorrectly explained as starting in second gear by even expert YouTubers, which is not true. Starting in second gear is given in some cars to avoid wheel spin in the first gear, especially if the road is slippery, like snow or icy conditions. That's why this option is also called as a winter start option. You will remember seeing it in the Rexton Alturas G4, and even the old Fortuner had it, I think. This number 2 is not that. This 2 means up to second gear. This means that the Autobox has only 2 gears to play with, which is the first and the second gear. The third and fourth gear are denied to it. Why do you need this? Go back to our gearing ratio example and you will understand that the large gears gave more torque and more pull at the low speed. Now, if you're going up the hill or coming down the hill, say towing some load or something, if your Autobox suddenly decides to shift up to third or fourth gear, what will happen? You will lose the pulling power, the low end torque, but get high speed instead. But you're up the slope, physically you're not going to go fast. So you want the Autobox to hold the lower gears long enough and juice out maximum torque, though it will strain the engine, but it will prevent the free running of the higher gears. Now, when the shifter is at 2, the Autobox might even downshift to first gear if it feels the requirement. The last range available in the shifter is L range or low gear only, which means it is up to first gear only, which logically means only first gear. So even the second gear is not available to the Autobox, the engine will be forced to turn the large diameter first gear only, thus giving you the pull you require for towing or quick overtake or going up a steep hill. What is this OD button? It is actually a relic from many decades ago. This is actually the OD or overdrive off button. This means that the overdrive gears, you remember the decimal gearing ratios? Who has it? Our good old fourth gear has it. So if you switch off this OD, then the fourth gear is unavailable to the box and it will behave as if it's a 3-speed gearbox. So the only torque multiplying large gears with greater than 1 gearing ratios will be engaged, and the torque dividing speed multiplying overdrive fourth gear will not be used. So playing around with these tricks, it will help you to mask the handicap of the Autobox in some places which I showed you in that graveyard region, and you can make the best use of this 4-speed gearbox under all conditions after you start living with the vehicle for some time. It is not such a big deal breaker. Well, that gear shifter is for normal life. But you wouldn't buy the Jimny for just that, would you? This is the Jeep life. This is the transfer case shifter. It is simple to use and slots in with ease. As explained before, if you're stuck and just want to share the torque with the front axle also, then you slot it into 4 high, 4H. If you are in deep trouble and want more torque, slot it into 4 low, which further multiplies the torque and sends it to all 4 wheels. In the Jimny, normally the front wheels are free hubs, meaning they are just spinning on their own. When you shift into 4-wheel drive, the torque goes to the front axle, but the wheels are not ready to absorb the torque because they are free. So they need to be locked in to the axle, and this is done using vacuum. The Jimny uses vacuum locking hubs, which use the vacuum created by the engine to lock the wheels in, just like say suction cups. So you will see vacuum hoses running into the hubs from the engine bay. You need to be careful not to rip these hoses out while off-roading. It is because of this vacuum suction action that you will hear some weird noises while engaging four-wheel drive, which is normal. Now, what happens if your one driven wheel has lost traction, but the other driven wheel is fine and on hard ground, but somehow doesn't seem to roll ahead? Look at this scenario. This left rear wheel is fine and on hard ground. The front wheels are also fine and have traction, but we have not yet called them into action because we are still on two-wheel drive too high. So ignore the front for now. The rear right wheel is spinning away to glory, wasting all that engine torque. This is because of the differential, perhaps the most misunderstood component anywhere on the internet. To explain this and to explain how differentials work, let's go back to basics. This wheel on the road doesn't roll off on its own because friction is holding it back. Let's say that a twisting work done by 10 Newton meters of torque is just enough to make it overcome this friction against the road. So let's connect an engine to do this twisting work for us and supply 10 Nm of torque. And the wheel overcomes this friction and just starts to roll. But the engine has much more capacity to do this twisting work, say up to 100 Nm. If the engine supplies all this torque to this wheel, then simplistically speaking, the first 10 Nm of torque will be used to overcome friction. The extra torque being supplied will help it to gain forward speed, spin faster, and roll ahead. Now, what if the same wheel is on an icy road? Obviously, there is going to be lesser friction holding it back. Let's say just 5 Nm of torque is enough to overcome friction now. Now again, if the engine supplies just 5 Nm, it is enough to start spinning the wheel, and if your engine supplies 10 Nm, simplistically speaking, 5 Nm will be used to overcome friction and the extra torque rolls the wheel ahead with a proportional forward speed. But since the road is icy and the wheel won't be able to bite or grip the surface ahead of it, it won't be able to comfortably roll ahead, right? It will slip and skid and some drama will be there, but it will roll ahead awkwardly. Because it is shamefully unable to utilize all that extra supplied torque, it is unable to put it down on the icy road because of lesser grip. Let's take this to the extreme and hold the wheel up in the air. Now there is no friction with the air. The only thing preventing the wheel from rolling off is the mechanical friction of the axle and the hub, which is very low. Let us say only 2 Nm. Now our engine has to give just 2 Nm of torque to make the wheel spin freely. If the engine supplies anything extra, only 2 Nm of it will be used to spin. And now in this case, since there is nothing absolutely to bite or grip onto, there is no reaction and hence the wheel simply cannot absorb anything more than 2 Nm of torque. It will simply spin in the air, drinking only 2 Nm torque regardless of what the engine is capable of supplying. In a car, there are two such wheels on an axle connected by a differential in the middle. The differential has two functions. Let's say two rules it obeys. Number one, it will allow the wheels to spin at different speeds. Why is this required? Well, if you're taking a turn, the inner wheel has to cover lesser distance and hence slow down compared to the outer wheel, which will go faster to cover the longer distance it has to do. So this differential allows each wheel to have differential speeds. But because of the way the mechanical gearing inside the differential unit is set up, while doing this, it also splits the torque equally between the two wheels. This is called an open differential and will be our rule number 2. Now let's put both wheels on the road. We know that each requires 10 Nm of torque to start rolling, overcoming friction. No problem, the engine has the capacity to supply 100 Nm, but the differential will, simplistically speaking, demand first 20 Nm of torque, split it equally as 10 Nm to each of the wheels to help them each overcome friction. And now that the wheels are biting and gripping and rolling ahead on the road and getting some reaction from the road, the differential will supply more torque. The differential will in turn demand all the 100 Nm from the engine and split it equally to both wheels, helping them to not only overcome friction but spin faster and proportionally gain forward speed using the extra 40 Nm each. Now let's put one wheel on ice. This wheel needs only 5 Nm to overcome friction, but the left wheel on the road needs 10 Nm to start rolling. This is where the lazy differential pumpkin shows off its third rule. The third rule is that an open differential supplies only that much torque required by the wheel offering least resistance. In this case, the right wheel, which requires only 5 Nm because it's on ice. And because of the second rule that equal torque will be split to the left and right wheel, the left wheel also gets only this 5 Nm which is supplied to it. Now the left wheel needs 10 Nm to make it roll. So this 5 Nm is inadequate for the left wheel to make any movement. Now let's lift this wheel in air. Now it requires even lesser to start spinning, only 2 Nm. Again, the differential rule number 3. It will supply only 2 Nm to the wheel in the air, which is offering the least resistance in this case, and this is enough to cause it to start spinning freely in the air. Since no more capacity to absorb the torque is there, the differential doesn't supply anything more. But sadly, due to rule number 2, which is the equal torque rule, the left wheel on the road again gets only 2 Newton meters, and which is not enough for it to make the left wheel on the road move ahead, and hence the vehicle won't move ahead and the vehicle is stuck. To get out of this situation, vehicles like the Suzuki Jimny use something called the brake LSD, or brake locking limited slip differential. What happens is that when this wheel is spinning in the air, the vehicle reactively senses that the wheel on the right is in the air and is spinning freely and applies brake to the right wheel. Once that wheel is braked, it has infinite resistance. It will demand infinite Nm of torque to overcome the friction against the immovable brake pads. Right? Let's now flip the third rule of the differential and use it against it. Now, relatively speaking, the left wheel on the road is on a path of least resistance and demands only 10 Nm of torque, which the lazy pumpkin open differential will supply, and this will help the left wheel to roll ahead. The second rule is still valid. The torque will split equally to the other wheel also. So 10 Nm of torque will go to the wheel in the air also, but the brake will simply grind away all that supplied torque as heat, not letting the wheel rotate at all. So the left wheel on the road overcomes friction, moves ahead, and the vehicle is not stuck anymore. Eventually, the vehicle will automatically release the braked right wheel, and since both wheels have equal resistance after that, they can absorb more torque, and the differential will supply the full 100 as 50-50 equal to both wheels, helping them move ahead with speed. Notice that in the open differential, the torque distribution is always equal between the left and the right wheel. The differential was open always throughout this adventure, and we merely fooled the lazy differential to choose the wheel that can gain traction. In complete contrast, in vehicles like the Scorpio N or Gurkha, we do not leave the differential open. We intervene and lock the differential action either mechanically in the Gurkha by pulling levers by the driver, or automatically electronically in the Scorpio N. Once we lock the differential in these vehicles, the wheels are no longer allowed to spin at different speeds. The axle becomes one unit, like train wheels. Now, in an open differential, the torque on the left wheel and the torque on the right wheel were equal. In the locked differential, the speed on the left wheel and the speed on the right wheel are equal. Locked differential will see that the wheel on the air is at 0 RPM. It diverts 10 Nm of torque to the left wheel to help it overcome the friction and supply nothing to the right wheel. When it gives a little bit more than 10 Nm, say 11 Nm of torque to the left wheel, it starts to rotate slowly at say 1 RPM. Using the extra torque, it moves ahead and the vehicle comes out. The differential will supply whatever torque that the right wheel also requires to maintain the same speed, that is say 1 Nm for 1 RPM. It will continue redistributing this torque as required, always maintaining same rotational speed of left and right wheel. Finally, it will take all the 100 Nm and split it 50-50 equally if both wheels are in a position to absorb it, and both will get good forward speed and move at say 10 rpm on both wheels. This obviously, this locking differential must be opened once you're out of trouble, because the lock differential will not let you turn the wheels since they're not allowed to move at different speeds. So each method has its own pros and cons. The Jimny gets away with this shortcut of brake LSD because it is so light in weight, and so it won't stress the brake pads much. Heavier vehicles like the Gurkha and Scorpio will be better off by mechanically locking their differentials to do heavy off-roading. Off the road, in the Jimny's natural habitat, it is very agile and nimble. The things I love about it are, number one, its compact size. It is great for squeezing into the tightest spots off-road, which would be difficult if you had a bigger, wider car. Number two, I absolutely love the solid front axles. This is the only vehicle now in the mass market with solid front axles. With the last Gurkha Extreme gone, the Jimny is the only thing which has the solid front axles. It makes it extremely robust and simple, and it gives you crazy wheel articulation. I have explained it in earlier video, but you can see here. Solid axle is full width, right, end to end. So the tires behave like kids on a seesaw. They go up and down, but in a nice large curving circle, right? Independent front suspension, IFS, are like half shafts with limited travel going only up and down. With this crazy articulation, what you will always do is that one of the wheels will always be on the ground, regardless of where you're climbing or creeping. This is great blessing off-road. The third thing I love is the lightweight of the vehicle. Yes, the engine is underpowered, and yes, it is a petrol, not very torquey. All that is true. But it is so light that it's very hard to get it stuck anywhere. It's a compact mountain goat with 4 long legs, impossible to bog down off-road. Fourth, what I like is the stock approach and departure geometry of the Jimny. Interestingly, Jimny is one of those few vehicles whose departure angle is more than the approach angle. This is helpful when, like in this case, the approach is not an issue, but you might want to prevent hitting the rear overhang. So a good departure angle also helps. And in some tight trails, if you want to reverse up onto something, a good departure angle will help you get up in reverse. The other factor I would count as a great advantage is that the Jimny is arguably the most internationally mod-friendly car. And thanks to this international appeal, you could get a whole lot of kit for the Jimny from abroad, especially places like Thailand. As a direct spin-off, the international appeal also gets you a lot of technical information about the Jimny, including engine remaps, dyno charts, and whatnot. This lets you tap into the larger community much beyond our domestic market. Fifth and finally, the thing I love about the Jimny is its insane simplicity. On the Gurkha, I carry a full garage worth of parts in my back. With the Jimny, there is nothing you can't fix with duct tape and bungee cords. No heavy diff lockers, no turbo, no nonsense. It's just Japanese elegant simplicity at its simplest best. And there lies my catch-22 conundrum. And here's what I don't like about the Jimny. For all these simple systems to work, the size and weight have to be compact, which means that the payload and load carrying capacity is severely limited. The car is narrow in and out, and the rear seats can at best fit maybe 2 adults or 1 Hector. The low weight also means we have to be very, very wary of putting heavy modifications or add-ons like off-road bumpers, tents, winches and all that. So, what is the verdict? For me, personally, off-road, I find the Jimny can do everything that my Gurkha does, probably with lesser drama and theatrics. It gets stuck far lesser than my Gurkha and can climb slopes and crawl rocks with more agility than the heavy mammoth Gurkha. This is an honest advantage that I felt that the 1200 kilo Jimny has off road, and I really felt it while I was spending time with it. But what you need to remember, if all hell breaks loose and we are in deep trouble and bogged down in slush and muck at the end of the world on the other side of a river, the Gurkha will be my weapon of choice as an apocalyptic doomsday device. It is built heavy, a little too heavy, I must say, but it can pull through all day like a freight train. I'm comparing this Jimny to the Gurkha as a reference because both have similar power figures and both are primarily suited for off the road duties rather than on it. Jimny is the lightest and Gurkha is the heaviest in its segment, which will help us understand the trade offs between a heavier and a lighter vehicle. The lighter vehicle will obviously be nimbler, more agile, get bogged down lesser, and be quicker to accelerate ahead, assuming similar engine power or torque figure if we compare it to the BS6 Gurkha, not the updated BS6.2. So the lighter car does have its own advantages, but the slow, ponderous, heavier vehicle will be able to tow more, carry more on its roof, and have better payload capacity overall. This is because of strength and structural reasons and what kind of loads that the axle weight distribution can handle. So a heavier car generally, while maybe slower, it will carry more on it, in it, and behind it. The Jimny, therefore, is restricted in this load carrying capacity, both inside and out. The roof load is restricted about to only 30 kilos. And there is always a direct relation between vehicle weight and the roof load capacity, as you can see in this chart here. The Jimny can tow only like its own weight, like it's rated at 1.3 tons, while the Gurkha can tow much more than its own weight, rated at 3 tons, all day using that large hearted 2.6 diesel. That's the fundamental difference, which will lead to entirely different workhorse applications for both of these. If you can discern it clearly, you will use it accordingly. Remember, any modification you do is going to add weight, and in the Jimny's case, this can considerably affect performance. The most popular mod that one does after getting the car is upsizing the tires, which, if done aggressively, will zap out the torque from that puny motor and make it feel more underpowered than it already is. So, if you are getting the Jimny, my humble recommendation is first drive it stock for some time and go off road with it. Live with it for a while and then let the vehicle demand what mods it needs from you rather than just bolting on things for aesthetics. Speaking of weight, if you think the Jimny is underpowered, here's the heavyweight BS6 Gurkha of mine. You look at the power figures and you'll see that the difference actually and how it is all relative. You can have fun calculating power to weight and torque to weight, and these things become more contrasting. I'm living with this one on a daily basis, and of course, have improved with this BS 6.2 new Gurkha. What about the Thar? We have been speaking about all this, but what about the Thar? I think the Thar is a great package. It is the best of both worlds. It has got ample power and torque on tap. It is not compact as the Jimny, but it's not as big and burly as the Gurkha itself. It sits on a nice sweet spot, and hence it is suitable for a wide range of applications for a wide range of people, even as a daily driver. The sales numbers also show the same trend, with the Thar flying off the shelves, Jimny doing some niche numbers, and Gurkha doing some surgically niche numbers, very, very low. It is interesting to estimate the lifetime sales of all these three vehicles because they are one order of magnitude different from each other, with the Thar selling in lakhs, the Jimny selling in tens of thousands, and the Gurkha clocking lower thousands. We can continue to play keyboard warrior with these power to weight and talk to weight figures and be paper tigers about it, but actually, a lot will depend on the actual drivability and how the gearing and how this whole power is put down on the road, as we have already explained in detail throughout this video. Mind you, all this is curb weight, okay? So, curb weight is no passengers, no nothing, no cargo, nothing. It's as it stands on the curb side. You throw in four hefty bros into this each car, then the numbers will suddenly skew. Anyway, personally, since I carry the whole house and the kitchen sink with me, I'm a sucker for payload and cabin space. And that's sadly why the Jimny is too small and too light for me, my personal use case, from an expedition or an overlanding lens. Otherwise, just as a pure off road Jeep, I've had so much fun with the Jimny during my time with it that I honestly prefer it over my Gurkha. That is the reference frame I have, and that's what I can tell you. It's so simple, so nimble, and so easy to fix that it's an off roader's delight. Even if you manage to break something, some of these parts are easily available, and that K15B is so notoriously simple, your petrol bunk mechanic will be able to fix it. I really enjoyed my time with it off road, and I prefer it over the Thar and Gurkha for off road. I think the Jimny is a nice choice if you are an amateur getting into off roading just now, a newbie, or it's a great choice even if you're an expert and want to continue off roading. This is a great choice that we have in 2024-25. On road, on the highways, and at speed, the Thar really outshines both these cars, the Jimny and the Gurkha, by miles. If you spend a lot of time on the intercity runs or on highways, then the Thar makes a very, very strong case for itself among these four-wheel drive vehicles. If you are a small family, say up to 4 people, or if you want a weekend fun off-roader, or you want a one-car garage that gets you shuttling between work and home daily, picks up groceries en route, and still cures your midlife crisis during weekends, the Jimny should be at the very top of your shopping list. And if you're confused between the manual and automatic, just buy the automatic. That notchy manual will make you regret your life choices daily. And I've showed you how the automatic is as good as the manual for most times. And in case you never plan to go off-road, ever, then please don't buy the Jimny. For the same price, there are far, far superior car options out there. The Jimny is a pathetic mall crawler, and you will regret it as soon as your hashtag Jeep life and this initial euphoria honeymoon weeks are over. If you have another primary car and say you can afford a second lifestyle vehicle or looking for something, for the side, then this is a no-brainer. Just go for it. All this, if you are provided you're able to see beyond its tiny, non-scary looking diminutive persona. Somehow, most of we car buyers want our SUVs to look scary on the road. The Jimny is definitely not that. It is well proportioned, it looks nice, but it's definitely not scary, and it won't part the traffic like Moses because it is small. The first time I saw it next to my Gurkha, it looked like a size 11 shoe. That's how big it is. All that apart, underneath this tiny packet, there is an indestructible tank. And if you can understand its benefits vis-a-vis its shortcomings, it is definitely a very, very good underrated car you should consider. Thank you all for your patience. And if you like this video, share the joy, share the video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and take the time to watch all the other detailed reviews that I've put up, the Gurkha, the Rocks, the Scorpio N as well, before you make any buying decision of any of these cars. Thank you, and see you soon in another video. Cheers, guys. Drive responsibly and stay safe.